So today's lecture is going to be on imperialism. So we're part one, so it's going to be a 2-day thing where we're talking about imperialism. So we just got all this territory from Cuba. We got all this territory from Spain. And now what does that mean? What does that make us on the world stage? What does this really do for the country? So we're going to be talking about that, and we're also going to be talking about where else is the U.S. involved at this time. So we're in Unit 6. We're going to get questions 1 through 2 and 12 through 16. So first thing, so what does imperialism even mean? So you hear that word, you should hear that word a good bit. So what does it mean? Generally, it's a country occupying another country, so they have some type of control over that country, and they're usually there for profit or some type of strategic or military advantage. So they might want to grow things there. They might want to sort of use it as a resource base, so using the resources there and exporting them back to the home country, or they might want it just for military purposes, to keep an eye on another country, to be able to sort of dock their boats there, which is what we're going to talk about in a second. So the U.S. motives. So this is dealing with number 2. So there's this guy named Alfred Mahan, who's the guy in the picture there. And he's a military, he's in the military in the U.S., and he has this belief that true world powers, so the big players on the world stage, have sea power. So they have this huge degree of sea power. They have a big navy that can move across the globe quickly and efficiently. And the way to do this at this time is to get bases across the world. So it's pretty hard just to sort of or sort of navigate your boat somewhere and then have nowhere to dock, nowhere to sort of get more supplies, anything like that. So his belief is that if we can become this imperialist nation, we can have all these bases across the globe, so we can dock our navy there, and we can really emerge as a world player on this stage, which is a very huge stage. So the ultimate goal, imperialism, would be for Mahan at least, would be to make us a world player by getting all these bases and being able to move across the globe quickly and really sort of step in when we feel like it's needed. Our spheres of influence will grow, which we'll talk about that in a while as well. So Latin America, so we've dealt with Cuba now. Cuba is now a protectorate of the U.S. We've gained all these new territories in Latin America from Spain. And now we're going back. So what was the Monroe Doctrine? So if you remember from previous times, it's basically the U.S. saying, stay out of our sort of America, stay out of North, South America, Latin America, and we'll sort of stay away from y'all. So sort of this agreement like, you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone. Well, at this time, so for number 12, they want to add the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. So it's sort of stepping up the odds for U.S. and for European nations. So what it says is the U.S. will intervene in conflicts between European nations and Latin American countries. So we're not only just going to sort of say stay out, we're going to actually intervene. We're going to provide some physical resistance to European nations dealing with Latin American nations. So what this does is basically it's trying to keep Europe out. So we want to sort of take advantage of or utilize Latin America for our own uses, and we want to sort of keep Europe away. We want control over this territory. So and that gets us into diplomacy. So diplomacy is like dealing with other countries. It's the tactics you use to get what you want. And one thing here is Roosevelt used big stick diplomacy. So his idea was that we're going to negotiate peaceful with you. We're going to say we're going to try to work something out here. We're going to get something done. But there's always sort of that big stick in the background. So you're always sort of willing to bring that big stick out and use it and sort of use force as well. So it's a way of saying we're negotiating peacefully, but really there's always that threat of force behind it. The second kind of diplomacy is dollar diplomacy. So this is for number 15. So what was the purpose of it? So this was a tactic used a lot by Taft especially, and by Wilson as well, but it was targeting Latin America and East Asia. It's the idea of investing in foreign nations, so we're going to give money to stabilize them in our perception. We're going to stabilize your country, we're going to raise sort of your poverty, or lower your poverty level. But then the U.S. gets rights. They have the ability to sort of make some profit there. So they have control to an extent. So it's this idea of we're going to give you some, but we also want some in return. So this brings up the idea, is this ethical? Is this okay to do this? Because it sort of makes the country dependent on your money. So if let's say in this picture right here, it's talking about Santo Domingo. So it's like, if we keep giving them money, are they really building up their own economy? Are they becoming a country that can be independent? Or are they just dependent on us? And that's where we're also going to talk about Mexico. So it's not all just the islands around Latin America or like down there near Panama and all that kind of stuff. It's also right below our border. So in Mexico, there is a civil war going on there. There's two groups sort of fighting it out for power. Initially, the U.S. is supporting Pancho Villa, who is you see there underneath Mexico. So we're sort of supporting him at the beginning, but then Wilson changes his mind and switches back to the government in control because he feels like that government's made some strides. They're trying to respect human rights more now. They're really trying to make changes. Well, this upsets Pancho Villa greatly because at first he had the U.S.'s support, and then obviously Wilson changes his mind and switches it. So it sort of really hurts their cause in trying to get this Civil War won on their side. So what he does, so for number 16, he comes into Columbus, New Mexico. So he crosses the border from Mexico to New Mexico, and he burns Columbus basically down. He kills several people, and it's really a sign of disrespect, a sign of I'm really upset. We're making a statement that's saying that what the U.S. did here is not right, it's not ethical, and we're really going to show you we mean business. And what happens though? So after he burns Columbus, New Mexico, he runs back to Mexico, and he's being chased by U.S. troops for almost 2 years. So they're chasing Villa and his sort of followers around Mexico for 2 years. They never actually capture him. There's a lot of sort of bloody conflicts between U.S. and Mexican forces, but they never catch him. So that's something to remember. So there are people who are actually willing to take out their thoughts, their feelings, their philosophies out on the U.S. here because they believe they are being treated wrongly. And the last thing here is the Panama Canal. So I hope most of you have heard of this before. So it's basically the cut through from in Panama, so which is down in Latin America, and it gets things from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean much faster. Because before this, so for that first one, there are difficulties before the Panama Canal. It was a much longer journey. You either had to go all the way around South America, or basically all the way around the globe to get things to the west coast from an ocean, or just to get to the Pacific Ocean from the Atlantic. And this was becoming a problem because during the Spanish-American War, we had a fleet in the Pacific. This is a problem because they couldn't even get to Cuba by the time the war was over. So it really slowed down our military. So for number 13, so what was the main reason? Well, one thing was it was to get goods from Atlantic to Pacific faster. So we could make more money. It was cheaper. It was faster. We could benefit from it. So there's an economic base to it. There's also a military sort of idea behind it. And it's being able to move your military from west to east or east to west incredibly fast compared to what it used to be. So we don't have to wait as long. You don't have to go all the way around South America to get things from the Pacific to the Atlantic. We can get our ships through quicker, and they can become a greater force wherever we need them. So then what struggles to build the canal. So actually building canal was not an easy job. I mean, if you think about it, we're basically digging a trench, a deep, deep trench across a country and trying to connect Atlantic to Pacific. So it's incredibly difficult, it's incredibly challenging and complicated. So there were early attempts to do this, so it's not like Americans were the first people to think, hey, it'd be a whole lot faster if we could cut through here. The French did try to cut through Panama before. It failed miserably. One main reason was because of disease. So there's a lot of diseases down here because it's a subtropic country, so malaria, yellow fever, a lot of diseases that sort of to hurt these countries down there. It wreaked havoc on people who do not have immunities to them, killing a lot of Frenchmen and eventually Americans as well when we tried. So at first, the thing to remember with Panama is they're actually part of Colombia. So they are operated by Colombia at this time. And so the U.S. makes an offer to Colombia saying, basically, we want to build this canal. Do you agree? Like, here's some money. Do you agree? Well, Colombia really doesn't want the U.S. involved in all this. They sort of want to keep the U.S. out of this territory because it's a threat to their power. Problem is, so Colombia declines the offer. They say, no, thank you. So the U.S. takes it into their own hands, sort of backed up by Teddy Roosevelt at this time, and we help Panama start a revolution for independence. Pretty shady tactic, but we're going to sort of help Panama sort of emerge as their own country, and then we get to do what we want, pretty much. So it's an idea of we're going to start a revolution down there. So this is for number 14. So start a revolution after Colombia rejected our offer, and then we can build the Panama Canal and profit from this quicker transit from east to west or west to east. And that is all today, so we will pick it back up tomorrow.